With our first fight of the night, we've got Veronica Hardy taking on the undefeated 6-0, now 1-0 in the UFC, Jamey-Lyn Horth. And before we get to that card, I need to address the fact that I just called this card UFC Houston. This is UFC Austin. I'm confusing the previous Houston cards as well as me going to the CFP here in Houston in January. But I wanted to correct that before we get in. But should be a good card. And really, starting with Hardy here, it's going to be interesting. She's had a weird ride in the UFC so far. 2-4 now, and really has dealt with some different weight issues. Has just 6 fights in 7 years throughout the UFC. Has had some different health concerns, mainly concussion issues, and has bounced around between 125 and 135. When she was at 135, you really saw her struggle, and so she took about 3 years off between the Bia Malecki loss and the Juliana Miller win. And there was quite the difference. She was able to get down to 125, really take care of her body. The weight cut was not as detrimental to her health. And she really looked much, much better. I mean, Juliana Miller came into that fight, I'm looking it up real quick, as a minus 400 favorite and got walked the entire time by Veronica Hardy. The damage that she was able to do on the feet, circling and just being able to land hooks over the top, but also be able to defend all of the different submissions that Juliana Miller throws, was very impressive. She dominated in the clinch, was the bigger fighter, was able to leverage kicks to all 3 levels pretty well, and even hit a very clean head kick in the 3rd round to really put a button on it. So a tale of much development for Hardy despite her poor record, and for Jamey-Lyn Horth, similar in some ways. She fought her debut against Haley Cowan up at 135. And despite Haley Cowan's size at 135, she was able to really look just as physical and just as big as Cowan at that weight. So it'll be interesting to see how that weight cut goes for Horth in this situation, because she's gigantic. She's going to have, I think, a 3-inch size and reach advantage. So she should be the bigger fighter in this fight. And interesting to me is that she's now starting to train, and there's rumors that she's training with Alexa Grasso and Lupe Godinez over in Lobo Gym. So
that's confirmed.
Two great,
on her Instagram.
2 great fighters for her to be fighting with and training with, especially on the feet. And so it'll be interesting to see where she's able to see success, because where Hardy sees a lot of success or saw a lot of success, so does Horth. At range, she likes to circle a lot, likes to throw a lot of hooks. And where Horth could have an advantage in this fight is in the clinch too. Those knees for the tie clinch is fantastic. So should be an interesting fight. Andy, where do you sit in this fight?
Yeah, for me with Horth, I think that she needs to defend the takedown threat in order to win. I feel like I get the whole layoff piece with Hardy, and that's what kind of turns me away from her a bit. With Hardy, with that Renzo Gracie background, she trained in England some too. She's been working on her striking a bit, which is good. Like, she's improving her game. We've been able to see that, as well as like we've heard it too from what people have said about her. But I don't know how much Hardy's going to be able to throw that striking into her game, because we haven't really seen it. We've only heard it. And with how many people Horth has trained with, like the Lupe Godinez piece, the Alexa Grasso piece, she's got pictures of Malcolm Gordon on her Instagram. Like, what better person to train at 125 than Malcolm Gordon? I get Malcolm Gordon hasn't been as successful in the UFC as we want him to be, but I mean, that's an awesome training partner to have when you're at this women's weight class. He's fantastic. So I think with all the experience that Horth has had and all the people she's been able to train with in preparation for this fight, as well as Hardy's weird walk to get here. Like, the layoff, I hate it for her. I wish that didn't happen for her. Like, the concussion stuff is tough, especially in this sport. I feel like it's not talked about enough. I feel like it's talked about a lot in the NFL, but we are a couple years away from hearing about what the kind of stuff with the brain happens in the UFC, because it's become more popular. And it was already happening with her early on with the concussion. So that piece is a little bit worrisome for me with that long layoff. I'm going with Horth here, just due to who she trains with. I think she has a stylistic advantage. I also think that with Hardy, that last time out was I'm not as high on it as others are. And I think with Horth, we've got somebody that the UFC in this fight is positioning either of these girls to pop into the rankings, and they get a nice little top 10 fight probably next time out, which is not as uncommon, or excuse me, not as common with the men to get to pop in the rankings and go top 10 as it is with the girls, just because there's not as many girl fighters. So exciting opportunity for both of these gals, but I'm going with Horth.
Gotcha. Fair enough. I'm going to go the other way. I've got Hardy in this fight as a slight underdog. It's grown throughout the week. She was plus 115 to start, ended up moving to about a pick 'em, and is now plus 125. I think that the speed is going to be the difference in this fight, and Hardy's ability to strike on the in between. So between the disengagements and when they're really throwing in the pocket, I think that weight cut for Horth is really going to test. She's already fairly slow and will have the disadvantage. I think that could belabor her a little bit farther, and we could see an advantage for Hardy. But would not be surprised if Horth is able to keep it at range and really dominate the clinch either. So I've got Hardy for a half unit at plus 125. Andy, are you throwing anything officially on this one, bet wise?
Yeah, so I'm going with Horth minus 130, which is going for minus 140 on Caesars and BetMGM right now. I'm just gonna do to win half a unit on Horth. I feel like she's gonna win, but I'm not confident enough to be like I'm gonna throw a full on unit on this one. I think this one's gonna be a really entertaining one where you're gonna want to crack open a beer or make some popcorn for it. I think it's gonna be a really solid women's MMA fight, but not one that I'm willing to start opening up the bankroll in full on. But I do really like Horth.
Gotcha. So both of us are split on the fight as well as our bets, but should be a good fight, as you said, and looking forward to the next fight. We've got Wellington Turman coming up against Jared Gooden in a combination or in a pair of UFC fighters that combined for a 4-9 UFC record. So should be fun. Let's get into it in just a second.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Pilsners and Prelims, a UFC betting podcast by Happy Hour Sports. Just want to ask if you could like and subscribe to the video if you like the content that we're putting out, and be sure to stay tuned to what we have coming up in the future. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the other side.